Greetings, rational people across planet Earth. I'm Paul Elam, and this is a Voice for Men News and Activism, a weekly radio program dedicated to the stories and issues that matter to people in the men's human rights movement. My co-host is with me, James Huff. You want to say hi to everybody, Mr. James?
Hi to everybody, Mr. James.
Oh, you did that very well. We're going to cover a couple of news stories here, but to let you know that after our normal 30 minutes of news, we will be bringing on none other than Janet Bloomfield, a.k.a. JudgyBitch. She is actually here with us now, and I don't pretend for a minute that we can shut her up for 30 minutes, so I thought I'd just go ahead and introduce her and bring her in now. Hey, Janet, what's up?
Not too much. I'm looking forward to participating in the news. I'm not just going to sit here and listen.
That's right. I knew better than that. That's why I asked you to come early. That's why we're only doing 2 stories. Normally we try to cover 3, but I figured for the bitch factor we better trim it down to 2 and hope we can end it in 30 minutes anyway. We're going to start out, Janet, James normally reads the stories and then we jump on them like we're thugs coming out of the bushes. And we're going to let him start with the story. Ladies, listen up. A little bit of equality rearing its ugly head in your direction. You may be, in the near future, required, in order to exercise for the first time, to have a payment for your right to vote in American history. You may be required to register for selective service. James, what's the story on that?
WBEZ 91.5 has come out with this report. Should women be drafted? Congress may have to decide soon. The idea of drafting women into the armed forces and forcing them to fight in combat has no precedent in U.S. military history. But as women's roles change within the military, so might the draft. If your objective is true and pure equality, then you have to look at all aspects, former Army Secretary John McHugh said in October, just before he retired from his position. He predicted an emotional debate and discussion in Congress on the question of whether women will be required to register with selective service. Now, the last American was drafted in 1973, and the selective service went into deep freeze from 75 till 81. That's when President Carter revived mandatory registration in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, but applied it only to male persons. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the male-only policy. Justice William Rehnquist wrote that the policy did not violate the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause because the military treated women within its volunteer ranks differently from men, excluding them from combat roles. Now, those differences are melting away. The Army just graduated its first female Rangers, while the Navy plans to open the SEAL program to women. Many combat positions are open to both genders. A small advisory group called DOCOWITS, the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services, makes regular reports on such issues directly to Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, and has advised him to ask Congress to change the Military Selective Service Act to require women to register for the draft. I think Congress should either be faced with disbanding selective service and the requirement to register for the draft, or they would be required for women to sign up, said Colorado Congressman Mike Coffman, who sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Coffman, a volunteer soldier who served alongside draftees in the Vietnam era, favors getting rid of the draft altogether and introduced legislation to do that earlier this year. But others advocate opening the draft to both genders. Our male counterparts are thinking about the draft and its consequences from the ages of 16 or 17 on, said Christine Cavanaugh of the Truman National Security Project. What if asking women to register for selective service, we instill that same value early on and highlight their responsibility to our nation at a young age? For today's generation of young women, being drafted isn't exactly at the front of their minds. At UCLA, 24-year-old hydrology PhD student Brianna Pagan said she's never once thought about having to register for selective service. But 19-year-old Michaela White said it's only fair that women register. I think that if they're going to make everything fair, why not just make everything fair, she said. Not like 90% of the last 5% is like, oh, well, we still have a couple exceptions. Whether Secretary Carter agrees should be clear by early next year. That's when he's expected to advise Congress on how to integrate women into combat roles and whether to change the law to include women in selective service. Well, that's a big old can of worms, and one we've covered many times in the past. And
big old bag of bullshit, too. I mean, my God, there's enough bullshit in that article to start an auction barn.
Absolutely. Let's run it down by the numbers. I'm going to throw this out there. Okay, this is my opinion. If you're going to have a draft, open the draft to everybody. With the rate that our technology is mitigating physical capacity, we should be able to have women on the front lines. However, in keeping with standards of excellence required, there needs to be a minimum standard set for combat roles, and those standards must be equal for both genders.
I disagree.
Oh, no, I can't believe that. Please explain.
I disagree with that. I think we're confusing two issues. One is men and women registering for the draft, and two is combat. There's absolutely no reason you can't have all women combat troops. We can fill trenches full of all women troops with no problem. The idea that you must integrate men and women into the same combat units is a totally different issue than drafting women. Yes, draft women. Take all those weak little 18-year-old snowflakes and toss them in front of their own set of cannons. Sink or swim. You don't have male soldiers there to haul your ass off the field. You're going to rely on other women. So the pretty ones are obviously dead first.
Well, this is... hold on.
There is no need. Integrating male and female units is a completely separate issue than drafting women. Yes, women can go into combat. Okay.
Hold on just a second. Because I'm going to reiterate what I had said.
Mm-hmm.
And that is meeting a minimum standard, and that standard being the same for both genders.
But why should it? If it's an all-male troop, you can kick my ass on any physical standard.
When I go out to train,
yeah.
Okay, I don't care who is to my left or who is to my right. I'll tell you right now that training for women and men in basic training in the Army, in the active Army, at least, is not the same. What I am saying is standardize that. Those who fail get shunted off somewhere, male or female, doesn't matter. They get shunted off. They get the crap MOSs. Those that excel are the ones you want to put at the front lines. You're not in the war to get people killed and get people blown up.
That's what the draft is for, actually. It is specifically to fill combat positions.
It is to fill combat. It is to fill combat positions, but those combat positions need to be effective combat positions.
And they can be if you have all female units. If you ask women to meet a minimum standard, you just issued a pussy pass to 90% of women.
Now, well, let me jump in here and with some more. Another vet speaking here, and Janet, let me explain why you're both wrong and you're both right.
Okay.
In my opinion, James said earlier it was his opinion. I was going to tell him, if he just identified as feminist, it could be his fact. But since we are dealing with opinions here, when I was in the service, we did a lot of field exercises. I was fortunate enough, except for a very short period of time, attached to the 2nd Division in Korea, up in the demilitarized zone, or on it. that didn't see hardly any action at all, not much to speak of. But we did do a lot of field training. And what I noticed in the field training was that, and I am assuming that a lot of it still portrays today. I think the women probably work harder in the military now than they used to, but we used to set the women off in the shade, and we would, pitch tents, set up a mess, everything that had to do with being in the field. And when we had a jump, which is where they just give a quick announcement, you got to tear everything down, pack it up, and move it 20 miles, and reset it up again all at once. Then the women stayed off to the side and didn't do anything. Now, I agree, and that is part of the setup for women's incapability to fulfill combat roles when they actually get into a war theater. The other part of it is that Janet, it really depends on the theater you're operating in. Yes, right now, if we're on flatland Middle East, if we're not in the mountains of Afghanistan, but we're on flatlands, then women can do relatively the same job as men doing it on their own. And I think in those situations that all female combat units would be appropriate. But if we were in a place like Vietnam again, they would just get slaughtered. That's all there would be to it. They would get slaughtered, end of story. They would die not only from bullets, but from all sorts of other environmental conditions that have to do with jungle combat that really nearly take a lot of men out while it happens. Women in combat, theoretically, is a bad idea. It's just a bad idea, and it really doesn't even happen. Even though the article talked about the changing roles and that bullshit about a couple of Rangers, there's a side story to that. There was a Pentagon general, I believe it was a Joint Chief member, that announced there was going to be female Rangers, and they pushed a couple of them through and said, "Hurrah, you're Rangers now." Didn't fit the bill for really passing things, but that's a side point. But when you've got women in a combat situation like we do now, it still turns out that 97% of the deaths are men. And most of the female deaths are from non-combat injuries, non-combat accidents, planes going down, helicopters going down, jeeps wrecking, things like that, friendly fire. But they aren't out there. This whole notion in the article that they're out there in the midst of the combat theater, in some ways, yes, but it's bullshit. They are not the ones dying, and if we institute the draft, which we probably will, so that a bunch of left-wing politicians can say, see now, women are holding their own with men, the body bags coming back will still be filled with male bodies no matter what we do, because the military is not going to start sending home 50% of the body bags coming back with women. Because why? Because that will make us get out of wars that we have a corporate interest in waging. That's my opinion.
Okay, I think you guys are talking about professional soldiers that have enlisted by choice, and we're talking about the draft. This is scruffy your neck, off the street, here you go, you're going to fight. And I agree that jungle conditions are very difficult, but Vietnamese women have been living in those conditions, and American women can adapt if American men can.
Janet comes back with the ugly truth.
I really think the issue is integrating units. That's the problem, that the Marine tests show that women, they can't handle any weapon. They don't beat men on one single weapon with efficiency. They tend to injure themselves all the time. They can't get soldiers off the field. That's because it's integrated. It's integrated. Put all women units together and give them the cheapest, lightest guns they can and let them loose with no one to back them up. Those bitches will kill people.
I don't know. I don't know.
Sure they will. I mean, they settled this country. Think of when you get drafted into being a pioneer, which is essentially it. I mean, go back to 1750 and live in a sod hut in Oklahoma. I mean, women are tough in the right circumstances. And when women don't have men to fall back on, the issue is integrating. We're talking the draft, right? Just common women off the street. You put them in a unit with men and they're all hiding behind the guys. For certain. For certain they will. And you're right, it'll be mostly men who die. Don't give them any men.
I'm almost convinced by this argument.
Me too.
because I'm thinking of the psychology of it at this point.
You grab a group of streetwalkers off the street of Los Angeles and, go and rob them and see what happens to you.
Well, they'll still, unfortunately, get mowed down and killed by male troops on the other side, because unfortunately for them, ladies, when you go into combat, you're not fucking fighting patriarchy.
That's right. That's exactly right. But you know what? If we're sending men to face it, fuck it. Send the women too. You want equality? You got it.
I agree with that, and I'm going to take another step, and I think to say in this, if you can't cut it physically, now normally the standard is if you can't pass a standard PT test in the military, you're out. It isn't that you just get shuffled off to another job, but since the average woman cannot pass an Army PT test by male standards, we should probably have a different program where the ones that can't pass can go into the mess hall and make sandwiches and wash dishes.
Yeah, or put the ones who can't pass the male PT in an all-female unit with a female PT test.
There you
go. Then the women have to rely on each other. It's going to be more fragging officers and fragging other soldiers than any other kind of deaths.
I was wondering about that. I mean,
I can see it now, James. I can see it now when the female captain walks by. One of the women says to the other, "Those bars are fake."
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever seen a group of cheerleaders, though? A group of professional cheerleaders. Come on. They exhibit tremendous feats of physical strength working together as a unit. Now, of course, they're shaking their tits for men. But aside from that, if they can get together and do a cheer pyramid, they can pick up a weapon and secure an area. The trick is to not integrate them with male units. And if they die, they die. That's the purpose of the draft.
That way it's not all the... It's not the men lugging those 5-gallon,
right?
5-gallon water cans and setting up the showers and doing all the tent breakdown and setup, because the women usually just get in the way. And unfortunately, yeah, I saw a lot of that. Not once I got to my regular unit. I didn't see as much of it, but in training, I did see a lot of that. I did see a lot of, okay, we're going to go ahead and set up. And, yeah, a lot of the women would stand to the side because the men would move in, and they would move so efficiently and so effectively and have their hands on everything that if the women got in there and tried to do anything, we lost time.
Right. If there's guys to carry 5-gallon water jugs, women are going to sit on their asses and let the guys carry it. Take the guys out. You want water? Pick that thing up, bitch. That's the only way you're getting it.
Absolutely. All I know is I want to see Lena Dunham have to carry a 50 caliber machine gun 400 yards with 8 or 10 belts of ammo. That's what I want to see.
She could carry like an 80-pound cake over to a toilet and sit on it naked and just eat that whole damn thing. So I think she can handle a gun.
Oh, I think she could carry a 50 caliber anywhere if you told her that there was a naked little girl at the other end of the trip. Oh, Paul, you didn't say that. Well, yeah. It's true. But yeah, this is gonna play out into. I mean, this is a complicated story. It's not a very simple story about what happens with the draft when women are included, what happens in selective service. But I do know one thing that I believe is basically good. Women should have to register for selective service. They should have to put themselves at the government's disposal because women have never earned the right to vote in American history, ever.
Or we just need to get rid of it altogether.
Or just get rid of it.
Right. Yeah, personally, I would prefer the latter.
Me too.
Now, I think it's good to remind people that they have obligations to something greater than themselves, the key word there being people.
Well, also keep in mind, though, that the government will remind you because, it is a sort of a misnomer to say get rid of the draft. We'll never get rid of the draft because the moment our government needs a draft, it will have one.
That's right. So I think there's psychological value in saying you're 18, you are a citizen, you now have responsibilities. It's completely absurd that women have been exempted from this.
Wait a minute. Hold on. If you get rid of the draft, there is still that one binding thing that makes people realize that they're part of something greater.
What's that?
What's that, James? James? Oh my God, we lost James.
We lost James right when he was about to say the most interesting thing, the one binding
right
thing.
Up to the climactic part of the statement, and he disappeared.
Yeah. There's one thing that makes us all work for something better than ourselves. Yeah.
Either that or he's on mute and he's sitting there snickering at the both of us right now. I wouldn't be surprised. Well, with that, I think we can agree anyway that the draft sucks. Women being exempt from selective service sucks. Wars suck, and it is time for whatever way or shape or form that it takes. Women need to start paying for their rights. They've never paid for them. Men have always had an assumption of paying for their rights, of being subject to conscription at gunpoint, and that was part of being a citizen, that if the country got in a war, you had to go risk your life for it. Women have been exempt of all this, and that we've got that new movie out about the suffragette movement, and all the garbage we keep hearing all the time about how women fought for the right to vote. Ladies, no, you didn't. Neither did your grandmothers or great-grandmothers. Women did not fight for the right to vote. Women threw some fits and said they should be able to vote, and then men granted them the right to vote without any commensurate responsibility, and that's the way it's been ever since.
Right, and I think at the time that actually made sense. There's a great line in Game of Thrones. George R.R. Martin says that men face pain and danger on the battlefield, women face pain and danger on the childbed. And before the advent of birth control, before the popularization, the legalization of abortion, women couldn't escape pregnancy and reproduction, and that was their contribution. You basically,
fair enough.
Yeah, you weren't exempt from it.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
You're back. You cut off James right in the middle. You were going to tell us the meaning of life or some shit.
I was. That one unifying thing. Even if you take away the draft, there is that one thing that still reminds people that they are part of something greater, if you want to call it that. Taxes.
Yes, they do remind you of that. I think they even have those in Canada.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So there you go. If you want the patriotic spiel to roll out, get rid of the draft, reminding people to send their money.
Absolutely. James, why don't we roll on to the next story? We spent more time on that than I thought.
Will do. Here we go, folks. This is coming from Inside Higher Ed. Court wins for accused. Last week, Brandon Austin, a former college basketball player, filed a lawsuit against the University of Oregon for $7.5 million, arguing that administrators there violated his rights when they suspended him over his alleged involvement in a gang rape. Austin was able to transfer to a community college and play basketball there last season, but has since left to, so far unsuccessfully, pursue a professional basketball career. In the lawsuit, Austin claims that the punishment caused him emotional distress, lessened his chances of one day playing in the National Basketball Association. His case joins more than 50 others pending lawsuits filed by men who say they were unfairly kicked off campus after being accused of sexual assault. If filed last year, Austin's lawsuit would have seemed like a long shot, especially as the athlete had been accused of sexual assault at another institution before he enrolled at Oregon. But accused students suing the institutions that suspended or expelled them are now increasingly winning those lawsuits, including at least 4 cases in the last 4 months. Almost every week there's at least one more suit like this, Samantha Harris, Director of Policy Research at the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, said. That's fire, yeah. It's a very rapidly emerging area of law. Up until this point, it's an area that has not been super fleshed out by the courts, and earlier lawsuits have been largely unsuccessful. But that's starting to change. The increased success of these lawsuits adds another wrinkle to colleges' attempts to address the problem of campus sexual assault. Institutions are under intense pressure from the Obama administration and activists to crack down on sexual assault and remove alleged offenders from campus. But the stakes are now also high if they respond to that pressure by cutting corners. As recently as a few months ago, accused students seemed destined to lose lawsuits challenging their penalties. In May, it was widely believed that there had been just one such case in recent memory, the lawsuit brought against the University of the South in 2011, and that made it to court and had a favorable outcome for the accused student. Though a few cases have been success in way of pretrial settlements, including recently at the University of Colorado at Boulder, Swarthmore College, and Xavier University in Ohio, many more have been dismissed outright. Then in July, a California trial court judge ruled that the University of California at San Diego must reverse the suspension of a male student who allegedly assaulted a female student. The student accused the university of violating his due process rights by presuming his guilt ahead of a hearing, not allowing the accused student access to witness and evidence, and informing a hearing panel of his guilt instead of letting the panel reach its own conclusion. The judge in the case agreed. The UCSD lawsuit was, at the time, a rare win for accused male students who turned to legal action after having been found responsible for sexual misconduct. Since then, accused students suspended or expelled by the University of Southern California and the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga have also won lawsuits against their institutions. In September, a student who sued Middlebury College won a preliminary injunction allowing him to return to campus while the case is adjudicated. In Tennessee's case, a judge ruled that the university's policies were unjust, as they force an accused student to prove his innocence rather than a university to prove his guilt. Harris, of FIRE, cited key differences between the recent cases and the ones that accused students have lost. The losing cases focused on gender discrimination and are often heard in federal court. The case at USC, UCSD, and Tennessee were filed in state courts. They have a little more leeway to overturn cases because of the relationship public universities have as state bodies and the responsibility they have to due process, Harris said. Cases that claim an accused male student has been discriminated against because of his gender, Harris said, rarely result in the student winning. And that's because Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972, the gender discrimination law that requires colleges to investigate and adjudicate cases of campus sexual assault, does not provide a way to challenge disciplinary policies simply based on disparate impact. Excuse me. While university sexual assault policies do affect male students far more than female, the policies themselves aren't to blame, as they are written to be gender neutral. The disparate impact on male students is not because colleges are targeting men, a number of courts have concluded, but because men commit and are accused of sexual assault far more often than women. Two recent lawsuits against the University of Missouri and Augustana University in South Dakota were both dismissed for similar reasons. The cases that have resulted in wins for the accused are generally built on claims that the disciplined students' rights to due process were violated, not that they were being discriminated against for being men. Even lawsuits in federal courts are starting to have some level of success by focusing on due process. A recent lawsuit against Pennsylvania State University survived the university's motion to dismiss, with a federal judge granting the accused student a preliminary injunction that prevented his suspension and deportation back to Syria. In an analysis of the UCSD case, Aaron Bazuvis, director of Center for Gender and Sexuality Studies at Western New England University, said that the institutions can still fulfill their obligations under Title IX without taking the shortcuts the University of California at San Diego and others seem to have. When colleges fail to follow due process, it makes it easier for accused students to win lawsuits and reverse their suspensions or expulsions, and that could mean letting predators back on campus too. Not only for the sake of the students who are accused, but for victims and their advocates have a stake in the integrity of the process as well, Bazuva said. It is possible to hold fair hearings and comply with Title IX, and that is what colleges and universities should be striving to do. Not everyone's convinced that accused students can get a fair shake, at least not under the current system. Emboldened by the recent burst of accused students winning lawsuits against the institutions that suspended them, civil liberties groups like FIRE argue that the pendulum that has long prevented sexual assault victims from finding justice has now swung too far in the other direction. In July, congressional Republicans introduced a bill designed to reverse that momentum by limiting how colleges could respond to cases of campus sexual assault. The bill would allow an alleged victim to decide whether to involve police officers, but a college could not begin its own investigation unless the student chose to report the incident to law enforcement. Currently, colleges are required to conduct investigations even if police officials are not informed of the crime, a rule that victims' advocates say encourage reporting of sexual assault to campus officials. Under the legislation, both the accused and the accuser would have the right to hire lawyers at their own expense, and both would be allowed to question witnesses. Colleges could also choose what standard of evidence to use when deciding if a student committed the assault, rather than being required to use the lower burden of proof known as preponderance of the evidence. Last week, Senators Kristen Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York, and Claire McCaskill, a Democrat from Missouri, blasted the legislation and the support it received as disturbing. The two lawmakers are the lead co-sponsors of the Campus Accountability and Safety Act, a separate piece of legislation that would require confidential resources for victims of sexual assault and would impose fines on colleges that mishandle sexual assault cases. McCaskill said that while it's important for colleges to honor the due process rights of accused students, treating both the accused and the accuser fairly can be accomplished without turning campus hearings into courtrooms. The legal system is about depriving someone of their liberty, putting them in prison, labeling them as a sex offender for the rest of their life, she said, while the Title IX process is focused on campus safety. McCaskill said the Campus Accountability and Safety Act would help remove the underpinning of these lawsuits by making the adjudication process uniform for all institutions, requiring training for those involved with the investigations, and allowing both students to have advisors during hearings. When these proceedings are fair and professionalized, we're better able to protect and empower students, she said. That's including the rights of the accused. Okay, a lot of information to swallow in that. Whole lot of information. But I think we all get the general gist of the idea. This is about either following rights of due process and getting law enforcement actually involved in cases of sexual assault, or allowing campuses to fall under one similar standard for all institutions who receive federal funding, I imagine, and then having all those cases adjudicated by the campus.
Well, if Title IX is just about campus safety, why not just buy all these rape victims some Play-Doh and crayons and coloring books and puppy videos and put them in a room?
You forgot peanut butter.
Peanut butter, yeah. I mean, if it's just about safety, we can create bubble wrap safe rooms for them, can't we? I mean, they're doing that already. Or is it about unfairly attacking people?
Well,
how about, is it
there's always that borderline that they're going to scream about.
Well,
don't tell me what I can and can't do because I am a strong, empowered, independent woman
who needs crayons.
Who needs crayons.
I won't tell you what you can and can't do, but don't come crying to me when something happens to you that you don't want happening. The fundamental problem here is one that was started back in April 11th I think it was April 11th, 2011, where the Obama administration issued the Dear Colleague letter effectively eviscerating the due process rights of the accused. And all they're arguing about now is which is the better bad way to step on the Constitution, which is the better bad way to have a way to keep criminal matters out of the hands of the police, what's the best way to abuse the accused in sexual assault cases and to get away with it, and how do we protect the universities from the understandable lawsuits that will ensue and that are now becoming successful. And that article said 40 or 50. I believe if you go to menandboysineducation.org, Jonathan Taylor's organization, you will find in their database that there are now hundreds.
95 current ones.
95 current ones.
Yep.
And there's more pending. There is a lot of these going on. They're going to be more and more successful. And the schools, in the one moment of sympathy that I have for any of them, are caught in a little bit of a quandary here. They've got the Obama administration pressuring them to shred the Constitution where it comes to their male students. They have feminist activists crawling all over campus like cockroaches, looking for anything like that could possibly have resembled at one point mishandling any component of a sexual assault allegation and then pushing for a Title IX lawsuit based on that. And now, on the other hand, they have the people that are getting screwed over, the male students who've been accused falsely of sexual assault, are now coming back to sue on their due process rights. And as James read in that first story, we now have a $7.5 million victor. There are undoubtedly more on the way as precedents are set and as the constitutionality of this and civil rights violations are better advocated for in the courts. They're going to be paying out the nose. So no matter what they do, the school administrations are going to pay. My only advice to them is that if I'm between a rock and a hard place, if I've got a catch-22 where I'm going to pay no matter what, then I'm going to pay for my values. I'm not going to pay to kowtow to a federal government that is basically bullying all of our universities into abandoning the very principles that they were founded on. This is an Orwellian nightmare going on right now.
I don't know why it's so damn difficult for somebody to report to the local police. Why is that so fucking hard?
Because they want evidence, James. They want proof. And you can't complain that your boyfriend raped you and drag your fucking filthy STD-ridden mattress all over campus if you have to prove that he raped you. You're just fucked.
Yep, you have to present some evidence to police or there's not much for them to go on, at least circumstantial evidence. And don't get me wrong, I'm aware that rape is one of the crimes that's difficult to prove. I know that. It's not like you can just snap your fingers. But there is evidence in rape cases. There's evidence to be had. And just like anything else, when anybody can be a victim of a crime and find out the police are not going to be a big help. It's fucking life, folks. It happens. It's a sad thing, but the solution is not to shred the Constitution and to end the academic careers of any young man out there on caprice, because what do we have? out there, let's be real. We got Emma Sulkowicz level accusations. We have UVA rape hoax. We have Hofstra. We have Duke Lacrosse. We have women on Facebook that are threatening themselves and getting caught. This is where this leads. This led to the big thing. I forgot what school it was, where I think it was the people from 4chan or 8chan flooded it with false rape reports, where they had an anonymous testing. Continental. Occidental, yes, Occidental had a basically an anonymous reporting program where if you didn't even want to tell the campus who you were, you could just accuse anybody. You just call a phone recording and drop a name, and they'll go jerk that guy into administrative offices and warn him about the sexual assault policy. That's how stupid this thing has gotten. This is how crazy it's gotten. And of course, you've got Gillibrand and other idiots like that out there defending this stuff and pushing for more of it. All I can say, I don't have a lot of comment on this story, guys, tell you the truth. I'm just going to say I'm glad the colleges are getting their asses sued off.
Yeah, same here. Somewhere I read that 70% of all insurance payments paid out by universities last year went to male students wrongly accused of sexual abuse. Like every insurance payment that a university paid, the janitor tripped, chalkboard fell off and crushed someone. They were 70% were paid out because the payments are so huge, even when they're not disclosed. You kick an engineer out of his program and you are on the hook for millions.
Yep, and it's just getting started.
Yeah, wait till we get someone from Harvard. Let me see a Harvard MBA get wrongfully accused and kicked out by one of these kangaroo courts. We're talking $1 billion. A hedge fund manager? They blew up his career. I just can't wait for it. And honestly, these laws are gender neutral. Guys, you've got to start charging women with rape. Make her prove that she asked permission to put your penis in her mouth. If she can't prove she asked for that, she is a rapist. Nail her ass to the wall. Now, the good news for universities is that the payout for these chicks won't be that big. I mean, how much do you earn as a gender studies major?
Well, I would say you could roughly pay for it in value meals.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad to see it. I hope that the universities get the living crap suit out of them. And the thing is, I don't have to hope for it based on hyperbole or special circumstances. This is commonplace now. Lots of young men are getting ruined. They're finally starting to fight back, and I hope they fight back with vigor. I hope that a year from now they're saying, "What do you mean only 7.5 mil?"
Yeah, no. Exactly. They have no choice. They have to. Once you expel a man from university and basically ruin all of his chances of earning a decent living, what do you think he's going to do? Just go apply at McDonald's? He's going to a lawyer's office. This is just craziness. I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad. The more the better. Let's just absolutely gut the universities with these crazy courses.
Now all we got to do is we got to clone Sage Gerard. And, send about 50 of him out onto college campuses with a litigious bastard tattooed across his chest and start talking to these guys.
Well, I think it's interesting how much the media is talking to Jonathan Taylor now, who's been building this database. He's become an important source, which is fantastic.
Brilliant work on Jonathan's part. He's a great guy, too, by the way. I really like that dude. Anyway, enough of this. Why don't we talk about, speaking of pigs, were we speaking of pigs? Well, we're about to. David Futrelle has, on his latest rampage, and for those of you who don't know who David Futrelle is, you must have stumbled on this program somewhere in Lithuania. David Futrelle is a supposedly feminist blogger whose website, We Hunted the Mammoth, used to be Man Boobs, and I think he got kind of tired of all the jokes and changed his URL, which I would have, too. That was really dumb choice, David. But he tracks misogyny, supposedly, in men's rights groups, and he exposes it, supposedly, mocks it, makes fun of it. And then he really found a gig with this, and he ended up he was instrumental in the upstart of the false story out there that it was the MRM that was Roger Elliott's bag, the mass murderer. And so Daily Kos followed suit with him, and then a whole bunch of blogs exploded with it. Next thing you know, it's all over mainstream media that Elliot Rodger was an MRA, which he was not. What can you say? He is now, in the latest story, Cassie J, award-winning filmmaker, an extraordinarily good and competent filmmaker, has made a movie about the men's movement, featuring mainly people, a lot of people anyway, from A Voice for Men. The filming culminated at the International Conference on Men's Issues in Detroit, with that backstory behind it. And David Futrelle was talking to Cassie J. He wanted to be a part of this thing, and as long as he thought he was going to get his little 15 minutes of fame there and have a chance to come on and tell lies about the MRM, he was all for it. And when it turns out she did not use him apparently quickly enough, he got mad. And then when she came out with her trailer, which shows that she is actually going to produce a very balanced perspective about the two different camps between feminism and men's rights activism, he went ballistic, and he started challenging her credentials and started a smear campaign against her, and she termed it as a misogynistic campaign, and I totally agree that that's exactly what he did, because as we all know, you scratch a male feminist and you will find a misogynist underneath every time. It is not most of the time, it is not part of the time. Every time you find men that think women are incompetent idiots that need to be told what to do by feminist men in order to have a purpose in life, and David Futrelle is showing that in full color. Well, this developed into something else. Part of David's smear campaign, Jack Barnes and I wrote an article together. Jack actually wrote it. I just did a lot of editing, so we agreed on a byline, for a shared byline for the two of us, challenging David's assumptions, pointing out where David was in fact lying about a lot of things. And next thing you know, David's silent about it, and just a very few days, couple of days later, some asshat on Twitter comes out and doxes Jack, posts pictures of his family, mentions his daughter by name. And keep in mind, Jack's an over-the-road truck driver. He's like 1,000 miles from home when this hits him. This is pathetic, absolutely uncalled for, and I believe that David Futrelle knows what's going on. I believe this was his exact intent, and as a matter of fact, that gave us the title for this program tonight, David Futrelle trying to get MHRAs killed. And I think that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to paint a threat narrative about MRAs that is so egregious, so terrible, so threatening, that some lunatic out there who has a little bit more than Twitter in his arsenal is going to decide that he needs to rescue all the good women of the Western world from the evil, terrible MRAs who hate them. And I do believe he will succeed. I don't think that's going to happen with Jack's case. Jack's family's taken care of. I pity anybody that tries to do something there. But I do believe very much that David Futrelle's intent in demonizing and creating a threat narrative is that he wants to provoke some psychopath out there that will do what David Futrelle does not have the guts to do, but wants to very badly, to go out and harm one of us because he thinks it's saving women. With that, I'll turn it over to one of you guys to start the commentary, but that's the story as I see it.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I mean, he's definitely in the market to harm people, for sure. I have evidence of that in my own personal life. He's really, really lost the plot. His attacks on Cassie are just the perfect example of misogyny. She's just, I just think it's so hilarious. He's mansplaining to her that she should just sit down, shut up, and let her betters learn her how to deal with difficult subject matter and how to make documentary films. And isn't it weird that, boy, Futrelle sure liked independent films when it was a bunch of teenage boys getting ass raped on camera. He sure liked indie films back then, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he did, as long as they were being forced to eat feces and tortured and killed. That was art.
Right. Police
but the
officers.
law of opinion needs to be shut down.
Yeah. It's going to come out. He's crossed some lines. You and I know, Paul, that he's crossed some lines that have involved some law enforcement agencies. And Futrelle's slipping up. He's making mistakes. And if he is in the market to do what you think he's going to do, he's not smart enough. And he's going to get caught.
Well, I hope so. And I want to take a moment out of this, and I'm going to issue, I mean, let's say on the outside chance that we're wrong, that David is just a heartfelt advocate for women's issues, and he really just wants, he really believes that we're bad people and we're regressives and we want to set back women's rights and we don't want women to vote or to be able to be self-sustaining or have their own agency. Let's say he really believes that. David, you went silent. You went absolutely silent in the middle of Jack Barnes' doxing. You were talking about all this stuff left and right. Jack Barnes gets doxed, and even a lot of feminists came out and made an appeal for it to stop. I mean, I was surprised, but Jack shared some information with me. There were feminists that were outright demanding that this stuff stop. People on David Futrelle's side of the fence, yet David himself remained utterly and is utterly and completely silent on the fact that a 6-year-old girl has been stuck in the middle of this in front of the public. David, your silence, like, I already knew you were a scumbag, but your silence about this confirms it 100 times over. If you have any shred of decency, any decency at all, then you get on your goddamn blog and you call for this to stop. You condemn this to your reading public. You get out there and show you have one shred of values that anybody should trust you, because if you don't issue an apology for this, if you don't issue at least a demand for it to stop, then everything everybody thinks about you in terms of just being there to create a narrative that will bring harm to other human beings, even a 6-year-old girl, is true.
He won't do it. I predict.
No, he won't.
He will not do it. What he'll do is he'll clam up. He'll go back to trolling the men's rights board on Reddit or the Red Pill board on Reddit, and he'll pull as much stuff as he can out of context as he usually does to feed his crowd of friggin' Radfem Hub supplicants. That's what he does. That is always what he does.
See,
He opens his mouth, he shoves his own dick in it, everybody calls him out on it. He goes back to trolling the boards. That's what he does.
I gotta say, James, I think that David's probably, you know, like 40 or 50 buckets of fried chicken away from sticking his own dick in his own mouth. But but I agree with you in principle. What he does is he plays duck and weave, and I'll give it to the guy. I don't give him very many compliments. He's good at lying. He's a very accomplished, skilled, manipulative, and this is something that Robert St. Estephe has brought up in our comments several times, and I'm going to address it here. It is a mistake, and I real frankly, I know nobody gives a damn, but I'm really tired of people coming into the comments at AVFM saying, why are we giving this guy any attention? Dude, if you're an MRA, you need to be paying attention to your enemies. You need to be paying attention to the tactics they're using. If you go into reading any of the left-wing activism manuals, their sort of Bibles on how to disrupt, how to create threat narratives, how to do damage, how to spread lies. You'll find that David is quite well read and quite accomplished at this, and if we don't take him, we don't have to mention him on the site all the time, but if we don't take him as a serious opponent, and now here he is turning Cassie J into a threat. Somebody that just wanted to step in and get this stuff on the record, not somebody with any skin in the game really on either side. Obviously, she couldn't have been that much invested in feminism, or she wouldn't have been open to doing a balanced movie. She's obviously not that much into being a men's advocate, because she wouldn't be doing a balanced movie. She'd be producing propaganda. She's a serious filmmaker, and this guy is going after her too. We need to know these guys' tactics. We need to know who is doing it. The next time you see somebody on the internet that says, oh, MRAs, that's Elliot Rodger, that's your guy that you don't think we should take seriously. That's David Futrelle. So, you know, welcome to your opinion. Come on in the comments here and say how we should not be doing this program on David Futrelle and giving this pathetic guy any attention. Go ahead and leave that comment. I don't care. But I think you're very misguided to be thinking that way, and you're really not in tune with what activism needs to happen, because we need to be calling David Futrelle out and looking at the paper trail between him and all the lies he generates and how it filters up to the mainstream media and ends up in the hands of scumbags like Adam Serwer and Jeff Charlotte. We need everybody to know that, and we need the feminist side to know we know, because eventually David, being a professional liar, will erode his credibility even in the people he's lying for. They will see him as no longer useful, and they will have to ditch him and go get somebody else.
Yep, pretty much. Well,
a lull in the conversation. Janet, why don't you fill it in with something snarky?
I just like how, okay, they put whoever it was doxed Jack Barnes and used his daughter, which in essence is saying that his daughter is in some way responsible or in some way accountable for her father's opinions, whether you agree with them or not. I mean, it's exactly the same mindset as the fucking crazy, insane assholes in the Middle East who murder their daughters for honor crimes. It's the exact same mindset. How on earth could Jack's little girl in any way be accountable for his opinion or his thoughts? And yet they're using her face and putting her in harm's way. This is the enemy that we're up against. And I think you can call them an enemy when they're willing to throw a tiny little girl into harm's way here.
Well, here's the thing, and here's the other take on it that I see. What they're doing is they're using the girl as bait for anybody who might want to call local authorities or child protective services and say, oh my God, this Jack is such a bad man, and look at the poor innocent girl who's under his cultish sway. I think that's a good part of what's going on.
I think they can hope for all kinds of bad circumstances. Like, one of the things they might hope for is for if they keep screwing with enough people and enough children, which they have no compunction about doing whatsoever, if they keep that up, eventually somebody's going to decide they're not going to take it. And they're going to end up overstepping a reaction, which is exactly what these people want. They would love nothing more than for Jack Barnes or somebody else to go vigilante on them in defense of his daughter, so that they can write articles all over the internet about how violent MRAs are. I think that's part of it too. But I mostly think it's just because David Futrelle is a big bucket of pond scum.
Well, they only need to come to my house if that's what they want. I will kill someone without hesitation. Bring it, fuckers. Make your first shot a good one.
I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that at all. I know that I don't believe in vigilante justice. I do believe very strongly in self-defense. I know that I've had a couple of rounds here, I'm not going to get into details, where I had some concerns about personal security. And all I'll say is that I'm prepared to defend myself. This is getting worse as feminists are losing their grip on the narrative. The fact of the matter is, I mean, look at Cassie J's fundraiser. Take that, Anita. Take that right there in your poop chute. That's where it belongs. Look at what has happened here. This isn't even, and Cassie's right, this isn't, there's some MRAs, obviously, that gave money to that and people that support us, but there's a lot of people that don't even like us.
Oh, absolutely. Mike Cernovich has been quite outspoken that he thinks MRAs are pathetic, but he just hates. He hates watching the left try and decide who gets to speak and what they're allowed to say.
Yeah, I got to say it now. I got a kick out of that of watching Mike sort of posture his stand that this movie is precisely about the message that he finds so distasteful, and I thought his post on why he gave the money was a contradictory load of shit, but that's okay. He gave it. It helped. I'm not criticizing him for that. But this is sort of sidetracking, but I'd like both of your opinions on it too, is that what I see going on here is really fascinating. We now have a bigger MRA field than ever before. And when I say an MRA field, I am talking about people that have started Gamergate. That was started by MRAs in the gaming community. I have that on very good authority. This is not just something I'm blowing out here. We have conservative blogs like Breitbart. We have people like the other McCain. We have people like Milo. There's Sargon of Akkad. And there's all these people that are basically saying the same damn things that we've said for 6 years at A Voice for Men, saying them almost verbatim. And then instead of calling feminists, they're calling them SJWs, and they're saying, but I'm not an MRA. Same thing with Thunderfoot. All of us are fighting the same battle, but we have borne the stigma of being the door kickers, so we've got everybody out there basically saying the same message, but I'm not an MRA. And that's fine with me. Don't be an MRA. Just keep sending that message out there because it's working. And I just find that's an interesting phenomenon, is why do we have so many non-MRAs doing men's rights activism out there, for lack of a better word?
It's just become the new normal, I think, that this is, the word that Breitbart uses for it is cultural libertarians. And back when we were first starting out, especially you, Paul, back when you were first starting out, the idea was so shocking it needed a name. Like, what is this idea of which you speak? Sort of like abolition or civil rights or gay rights needed a name in order for people to process what they were hearing. But it's an incredible testament to the success you've had, that it's so much part of the culture now that people don't feel the need to attach a name to it anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think another part of it may be that there is a natural, and I understand it, there is a natural distaste in this whole community for identity politics.
Yeah.
And when you use a name like men's rights activist, which is really a lot, the actions that we take are a lot more complicated than can be reduced down to that term. Because we're not looking for a Violence Against Men Act. I mean, that's one of the biggest misconceptions I've heard, is that we're looking for special legislation. No, we're not. We're looking to change the narrative, which is the same thing that people like Sargon and Phil Mason and all these other great people do, is they change the narrative. And that's all we've ever done. It was just sort of a matter of historical perspective to use the name MRA, and I don't intend on changing it. Because in the end, this is about rights, but we just have the philosophy at AVFM that you change the narrative first, the rest of the crap will follow.
Yeah.
We don't need to do legislation. But I think you're right. I think you got a real good point. It's become the new normal. And I also think that the idea that MRA carries with it the implication of identity politics, even if it's not there, and I think that people sort of shy away from that, and I understand why.
Yeah, and it's a success. That was the whole point, was to get people to shy away from identity politics.
Yes, it was. So maybe I'm not complaining. Maybe I'm just observing. and maybe I shouldn't complain, but I do know that I'm very, very glad that all these. It's amazing what's happened just in the past year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah,
it's just blown up, and it's blown up right in feminist faces.
Well, it's too bad we couldn't be a little bit further along the track up here in Canada. But, you know, I think the good thing about Prime Minister Kendall is, boy, he's going to fuck this up fast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've probably heard it all in the news, right? Justin Trudeau has half of his cabinet women. Why? Because it's 2015. In actual fact, he has 3 more women than our previous Conservative Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, who happened to select his cabinet members on the basis of merit. And the difference was 3 women. Trudeau has got all these rookies in there, people with 0 political experience running some of the most important cabinet posts. He's going to just fuck this right up, as you would expect a Kendall to do when you elect him to run a country.
That works for me. Almost makes me want to say Hillary for president, but not quite.
I'm not sure she's quite. Bernie Sanders might be as big a joke as Prime Minister Kendall.
Yeah, it's hard to say. We've got a lot of jokes running, and I'm sad to say that as I watched the Republican debates, I thought they handled themselves a lot better. They certainly sound a lot more intelligent and less arrogant than the Democrats, but they don't sound fundamentally much different than they've ever sounded. I want to thank my wife. I want to thank my mother. Women, vote Republican. We got a long way to go when it comes to dealing with gynocentrism and politics.
Mm-hmm. Well, women are the majority of the voters.
Yes, they are. But what can I say? We still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm behind Trump 100%. I just love how he blows up the whole political system there. I'm all for Trump.
Hey, yeah, I find him eminently entertaining. If anything else, at least the son of a bitch is entertaining. Everybody else bores the hell out of me, but when Trump's on TV, I'll stop and watch. Let's put him on the spot, Janet. James, who should be the next president?
No, I'm staying out of this one. Nope, not getting an answer from me on that one.
Well, you haven't got one from me either, but that was a really failed attempt to pass the buck, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I will vote for whoever says that they will reestablish due process rights through colleges.
I wonder, and here's the deal, I wonder if there's a possibility we might actually have a candidate saying that this time around. Because, you know, Hillary's going to ramp up the war on women rhetoric. Fox News is starting to poke around. I got a request for them. I don't know if they ever ran it, but I got a request to give them some quotes for a news story, which I sent in. And when I looked at the news story that they were covering and expanding on, what did I see? But boysandmenineducation.org, Jonathan Taylor's outfit included in that story. I think we may see some of this, some actual response to the bullshit of a war on women like the Democrats have not encountered before. Because right now, hopefully, if there's any Republicans out there listening, they're starting to notice things like Breitbart and starting to notice that there is an audience hungry for this message, that they want to hear that their sons are going to be safe in college, because now they're becoming aware that their sons aren't safe. So hopefully, I mean, the Republicans screwed it up last year. They had a chance to shoot down VAWA, and what did they do? They said, well, we'll only pass it if you remove the protection for gays and Native Americans. I thought, oh, there's a brilliant political strategy. You guys are geniuses. And, of course, they shot themselves in the foot, and they ended up signing the bill pretty much as is just a few weeks later, signing on to it. hopefully this next time around, Republicans, if you're listening, men's issues are growing. They're going to resonate with your voters if you quit trying to smooch up to your female constituency all the time and slice out a little bit of time to address the fact that these females that you're smooching up to have sons and fathers and brothers. Starting to recognize that might just do really good for you.
It can happen. I think Donald's focus on infrastructure projects and bringing back, he likes to frame it as manufacturing, but he's not really talking about manufacturing. Most of the foreign worker visas he's talking about are in the services and tech industries. He just frames it as manufacturing to appeal to, you know, his working class base, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But most of those, the things that he's talking about are going to directly benefit men. Infrastructure, ladies don't pick up shovels. I mean, they'll hold the slow sign and they'll answer the phone to dispatch the gravel truck. But they're not doing any of the actual work. That will all go to men. Most of the tech visas are going to men. And a lot of the entertainment visas will go to women, so women will benefit there. But most of his program is designed to benefit men, not because he's targeting men, but because he's making sane financial decisions. And like it or not, men run the backbone of your entire country. They are 99% of all of the vital infrastructure workers that you have.
What's the matter with you, Janet? You don't think we need another 150,000 federally employed clerks?
No, single mothers need that, but you as a country, no, I think you're going to be okay.
I got to tell you, and again, I try to stay out of politics nearly as far as James is. I tend to take cover like James is right now. But I don't know Trump that well, but one thing I really do kind of feel pretty certain about is this guy's not a feminist.
Not at all.
And I just think it would be good for the country, maybe if we could get some leadership in there that acted like businessman instead. And no, that's not an official endorsement of Trump. This is me just talking. But as I look at the entire field of candidates, if I were prone to endorse somebody, it would be Trump. We need this system shaken up. We need the cages rattled. And we need people out there that are plain spoken, because it is politicians that have gotten us in trouble. And that's on both sides of the fence. They've sold us out for their careers, and now we're paying the tune for it. And we're going to pay it even worse than we are now. But boy, did we get sidetracked off on it. We're going to end up on this program talking about politics this time around before it's over, because this is going to be too juicy. This race is going to be way too juicy to ignore.
I did. There was a really interesting thread posted on Reddit. Okay, the regular MRA crowd, this goes back to Cassie's Jay's film. We tried for 2 weeks to get funding going. We managed to scrape together $25,000, maybe just a little bit more than that for her, and it was great. That's not a bad showing at all. The minute extremely conservative, right-wing identified Milo Yiannopoulos puts the Kickstarter in front of his audience, boom, it's funded in a day. I mean, there does seem, as a Canadian looking from the outside in, there does seem to be a very natural affinity between the American right, which is very much focused on a meritocracy, as opposed to the left utopia. There seems to be a real affinity between men's rights and the right. And I know that there's a lot of reluctance to acknowledge that affinity, but why is that? Where does that come from?
Well, I don't think it's from the right. I think it's more from the libertarians who realize that if they don't cast their vote in with the right, then they're totally screwed.
I think it's more complicated than that, though, and I've observed this for years. We've had a fundamental problem with the two-party political system as it relates to men's rights, because of course, on the left we have feminism and misandry, And on the right, we have chivalry and misandry. We have a lot of, understand that from my perspective, we haven't had a true conservative with any kind of political power since, oh gosh, how far back do we have to go to find somebody like that? Way back into, oh gosh, now I can't remember the guy's name, Kennedy era Republican, Barry Goldwater, that had an actual conservative around. What we've had is we've had religious fundamentalists who have co-opted the American right and said, we want small government unless you're gay, or we want small government and to stay out of people's business unless you smoke pot or do anything else that I find morally reprehensible. And so they're all about preaching small government until small government doesn't serve their morality, and then therefore a goddamn Gestapo state. That's why they turn off MRAs, and because a lot of the conservative elements that we find in our family courts are men who think it's okay to rape the other men to come in there, that feel like they owe it to the women. Those are things that need to be fixed on the right. They really do, and until they do, I don't think we'll always have this gap. But if we're going to have hope in the political system at all, it'll eventually come from a right that has pushed off the religious nutbags that run it, and who take on a more true conservative small government model and begin to recognize that equality under the law is not just something that you say to a room full of female voters. Once we get that out of the right, I think most MRAs will throw themselves behind politicians that are right of center. But until then, until we acknowledge that these guys are the ones that are still pushing for circumcision, that's a religious issue for some that still goes, that are still pushing for corrupt anti-male family courts. I mean, we got plenty of problems on the right. Our problems did not all come from feminism or the left. Much to the dismay of people like Bernard Chapin, it's just not true. And seeing this as purely a left-right struggle, that if we just abandon the left and go for the right, that we'll be better off, I just don't buy it. Boy, that must have been good. Nobody said anything.
No, I'm nodding. I had to unmute my mic there, but that makes a lot of sense, actually, and I agree with that. There are just as many problems on the right as there are on the left. They're just a very different kind.
I think they're more manageable on the right. I think the right can be reasoned with. You can't reason with leftists. It's fucking impossible.
It really is. It really is.
It's like trying to talk to a bottle of ketchup. It doesn't work. On the right, you can reason with them, but they're calculated and they're scared to death of losing the women's vote. They're already clamoring to hang on to it because so many of the women's vote goes left, and they're terrified to say anything. I mean, I understand why none of them would get up and say, hey, we won't reauthorize VAWA because of sexual discrimination. They weren't any of them going to say that, so they picked on gay people again, which unfortunately for their constituency is music to their ears. Yeah, it's a mess, but I believe it's possible that if these guys are going to... Milo made a tweet earlier where he made a point toward the mainstream media, the conservative media, supposedly conservative media anyway, that he said they missed their chance with Gamergate. That if they had picked that up, they could have really made some steam. And I started thinking about what he was saying. He's absolutely right. If the American political right would move themselves into the age of the internet and out of 1980s Reagan America, they would find that they will start gaining traction again, because they have right now, if you look at Breitbart, and again, these are lots of people out here that are sick and tired of left-wing messages, they're sick and tired of leftist bullshit, and the right wing in this country has been too bone-fucking stupid to look at this and say, hey, there's an opportunity here. They're still sticking Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson out there when they should be sticking Milo Yiannopoulos out there and Robert Stacey McCain. and people like that. These are good pundits with a lot of political knowledge. Hell, Dean Esme could do a better job than Tucker Carlson. Anyway, I think his point was very valid. The American right is missing one opportunity after another. They could have gotten some political candidate, any low-level politician could have come out in the middle of this Cassie J debate and said, I'm behind this movie. Not that I agree with everything that said it, but I'm behind this movie. Just to test the waters, just to gain some momentum, because they're going to need it. They're going to get slaughtered by the left next year in America. I guarantee it. They're going to get cut down to pieces because they don't have the balls to fight the fight that needs to be fought. They're going to soften up. They're going to go right back to the traditional family values, and it's not that I have anything against that, but they're going to go in the wrong direction off of the pulse of the American public, because the American public right now is starting to march to a different drummer, and the right wing in America is not picking up on it. They're too invested in Ann Coulter to do it.
See, that's why they need Donald Trump.
Yep. And it could be a time of change. I mean, if Trump is for real and he stays in good standing and remains a player in this race all the way through, it will come down to a lot of rhetoric on the war on women, and that is the opportunity for Donald Trump and the rest of the right to finally say, wait a minute, what war on women?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that he knows how to reach the audience that you're talking about. That's who his viewers were. That's the demographic he wanted in for The Apprentice, right? Isn't that what it was called? The Apprentice? You're fired? Yeah. So it's hard to say when half of his apprentices were women and just some cutthroat bitches he had on there. It's hard for him to say that he's embracing any war on women when he's so supportive of women in corporate America and in his own businesses. He has the demographic. He has the demographic that the right needs to win. They're crazy to take anyone other than Trump. He's the only hope. Otherwise, I think for sure it's Hillary.
Yep. If it's not Trump, it'll be Hillary.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be Hillary anyway, but because she's going to have to be beat on the war on women. In other words, in order to start really digging in to her appeal to female voters, somebody's going to have to lay waste to this whole war on women myth.
I don't know. If Trump can get the working class men out, the young working class men out, I think he's got a shot. Because they're the ones who just don't vote, right?
Yep.
And if you can reach that core group, a while ago a sociologist coined an acronym, and I wish I could come up with it now, but it's talking about this group of voters in the center of America that are neither right nor left. What they have is a very healthy mistrust of the rich. They would like to be rich, but they don't worship the rich. And at the same time, they're kind of resentful of the poor, always standing there with their hands out and never wanting to work. And that huge group in the middle, if you can harness them, you win elections. And they're mostly men.
Well, if they can be motivated, I think Trump is the guy that can do it.
I think so.
I really do.
I'm so optimistic. Oh, I want to see Trump win. And it would just be so perfect on the world stage. Prime Minister Kendall and Donald Trump.
Well, don't get your hopes up too high. I don't want to have to call you and check on you every day or two if he loses, just to make sure that you haven't iced yourself. But I agree with you. I mean, I will take anything entertaining at this point. The idea of, we lost Fred Thompson yesterday, yes. And I really liked that guy. I did. Great senator. And good actor, just an all-around accomplished guy. And I had hopes for him at one time that he might do something because he was actually willing to talk straight about things too, which is probably why he never got to be a serious presidential contender. But hopefully Trump will do something just to make it interesting, and if anything else, all of us who blog and write and do videos and are engaged in this god-awful ground battle to try to bring common sense and decency back into the American narrative need to be prepared to the moment that the Republican Party shows any interest at all in going after the war on women is to get right behind them and do it. You don't have to vote for them, you don't have to endorse them, but you know, if they're attacking the war on women, whether you're right wing or left, I hope you've got the sense to get behind that, because that is fighting the enemy. And if it's Donald Trump, it'll be a hell of a show.
Well, we can hope.
Yeah, my faith in the U.S. political system right now is
right where it ought to be.
Yeah. Right, look, I haven't seen either side of the aisle do jack shit over the last 30 years. And I've been paying attention for the last 30 years. I mean, I've been started with my dad sitting down watching the news and then rolls on from there, and you know, it's almost Futrellian, the way that they work.
Yep. It's sad, but we don't have to give up. Well, I see we're really close to being out of time. Feel like maybe might be time to start talking about next week. Let me see what time it is here. Oh yeah, it's time to wrap this up. Do you have Janet? You got any final thoughts on David Futrelle, on any of this stuff before we do our little song and dance to end the show?
Well, I guess I'd just like to remind American voters that the downfall of democracy, however you organize it, if you're longing for a multi-party system, just look to your northern neighbors. When 1,000 idiots get together and vote for something stupid, you get Prime Minister Kendall.
Yes, we do. From down here in Texas, we do send our condolences your way.
So I wouldn't get too worried about it. No matter who the president is, there's only so much they can do to really screw you up.
Yes, we know. Well, yeah, boy, that could start another 1.5 hour program about where the power is and what the problem is. But we won't get into that tonight. Janet, thank you for sitting in and letting us. This was not an interview. It was just to co-host it with us and to help us get this discussion out there. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Next week, folks, Robert Brockway is the new managing editor for AVoiceFromN.com. And man, boy, can you imagine filling Dean Esme's shoes? Holy moly, this guy's got his work cut out for him, but he's been out of the limelight, working in the back rooms to get things back in shape and running, and he's finally starting to get a head of steam back there. There was a lot of stuff to cut through. He's getting things organized. He's getting people organized. He's doing a great job, but you just haven't seen anything from Robert yet, personally. So I'm going to interview Robert on this program a week from today, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I want to talk to the guy that's replacing Dean Esme and see where he's coming from and share that with all you guys at the same time. In the meantime, if you like A Voice from In products or radio podcasts or other videos, our website, our forums, anything, please visit the donation button there and either give us a little one-time bit in the tip jar, or you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. We appreciate every penny that comes in, because this does take time and money to pull off. With that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody, and I know James has one final instruction for the whole world, whether they want to hear it or not.
Yes, I do. Folks, take the red pill.